cash clinic physician. Physicians, you had them pill mills, they took cash, you paid $250 each time to get a prescription for the oxycodone. 4, 6, 8, 10 a day. They took cash, they sold their souls. That's where the loophole is. This is where physicians or unscrupulous can take cash to prescribe for somebody who may or may be faking an ailment in order to get this marijuana. And remember, Senate Bill 1030 is low THC. Why didn't you put low THC in this amendment? And that's a good question, because as soon as you increase low THC, you increase the level of interest by pot smokers and abusers, and they could have easily specified a level of THC that was reasonable.
Just to address this question of the low THC, many of our veterans who are returning from 10 years and more, the high THC levels are actually controlling their psychosis. So those horrible memories that they're having and they're reliving every single day, those high THC levels are actually helping them stay in society. And, you know, on a given day, we're losing 23 of our veterans to suicide. So, you see, that's where, you know, I want to try to get you to look at the beneficial properties. And what's good for one patient is not good for another patient. So when you talk about debilitating illnesses, we can't just say, you know, that list of illnesses is a cookie-cutter prescription from a physician. Because I may be diagnosed with something, you may be diagnosed with something. Our DNA is totally different. So what works for you, you could be on prescription medications, you know, opioids, and I may not respond to that. So that's that relationship that you need to have between doctors. And that's where you do develop that relationship to see what is the best method of medical cannabis for you.
I believe Mr. Morgan spoke, then Dr. Dave spoke. Denise?
Yep. Okay. Right. Okay. Thank you. So, under Florida Statute 893, they actually have it completely open for you to have that doctor-patient relationship. And if you have one of those conditions or another one that would ever come up, that is within you and your doctor to have that relationship and that discussion for them to be able to say, okay, and recommend you to use or cultivate, as the Jordans do, their medication. So that is available. But thank you for the opportunity to rebut that.
Next question. We now have the constitutional right to bear arms, but you cannot, We now have the constitutional right to bear arms, but you cannot bear arms if you're a felon or an illegal or a minor or mentally ill. What makes you think that those constitutional safeguards will not be put into place? I believe with Amendment 2 is what it means. John?
For what? I don't even understand.
What the question says is we now have the constitutional right to bear arms, but you cannot bear arms if you're a felon or an illegal or a minor or mentally ill. What makes you think that those constitutional safeguards will not be put into place? And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that that means if this applies to the right to bear arms, why doesn't it, or would it apply to Amendment 2 in terms of felons and illegals?
In what regard, like caregivers? I mean,
Should ask.
Mary, you might.
You know what?
It's kind of a tough, we give the sheriff.
All right.
Very simple.
Please explain what a caretaker or caregiver is and the requirements for one.
Well, look, you're looking at a caregiver. Bob Jordan's a caregiver. Has anybody here ever been to a hospice? You ever visited a hospice? You saw caregivers there. A caregiver is somebody who gives care to somebody they love, usually at the end of their life or when they're fighting for their life. Do you think, you see these ads, the number one ad they've been running is the caregivers will be drug dealers. Now think about, why did they say that? Because we're scared of drug dealers, because we don't know the drug. Bob Jordan is not going to hire a drug dealer to come in and care for his wife. A caregiver is going to be someone that's going to be licensed by the state of Florida. You're going to have to come in, fill out a form, goes to Tallahassee, and runs a background check. Now, as far as the felony goes, I don't think felons are going to get to be caregivers. I don't think convicted drug dealers are going to get to be caregivers. I don't think somebody with a rap sheet that long will be a caregiver. I know this, if my wife is in trouble, like Kathy Jordan is, I'm going to be the caregiver. I can look at this man right here, this woman right here, and I guarantee you who the caregiver is going to be here. You're going to be hers, and she's going to be yours. Caregivers love. And caregivers are there 24 hours a day, and caregivers aren't paid a dime. That's who a caregiver is. It's who gives care at the end of life when we're fighting for our own life. That's the definition of a caregiver.
I think we've actually just heard one of the most honest things tonight out of Mr. Morgan is the definition of a caregiver, because that's exactly what we envision. We envision a spouse, a child, an aunt, an uncle, maybe even a neighbor that you've known for 35 years, and you've gone to those doctor's appointments and you understand their debilitating condition and their disease. Or we think of a caregiver as a nurse, as a physician, as a home hospice worker, whomever, but someone that has some either relationship with the patient or some sort of medical requirement. The authors of this amendment, and they like to reference Arizona about how don't compare with California and Colorado, compare with Arizona. Well, guess what? Arizona put in their language, which was not a constitutional amendment, that a caregiver couldn't be a felon. They didn't put anything else in this amendment except that they could be 21. And again, I take major issue with someone standing up here and having the audacity to say that we call someone that is a legitimate caregiver a drug dealer. Seriously? That isn't even close to what our commercial says. Our commercial says that a caregiver could be, that a drug dealer, excuse me audience, thank you, that a drug dealer could be listed as a caregiver because there is no requirement making sure that that doesn't happen. And actually Mr. Jordan will have to call up someone else because under this amendment he's not able to cultivate his own medicine because it's not written in the amendment. Is that compassion? Is that being a caregiver? I'm not sure.
Just 10 seconds, and I think this may alleviate some of your fear. Once this passes, a caregiver will be defined during the enactment in Tallahassee. It will go to Tallahassee, and the legislature will decide who is a caregiver, who can be one, who cannot be one. We couldn't do it here. This is part one. The heavy lifting comes later in Tallahassee. And I think you know that.
Good, and that's a lot of assumption, and if it passes, I really hope that happens. But like I've stated several times already, no rule, regulation, county ordinance, or state law can be more restrictive than the Constitution. This constitutional amendment is very broadly written. It gives a lot of rights. And I agree, we need to take care of our sick, okay? There's a right way to do it. This isn't the right way to do it. This is going to open more problems than fix. And, you know, I would have hoped that, you know, I believe there's only one university in the entire nation that's allowed to study marijuana. Well, we should probably push for more studies, okay? Because you guys even said it, that we're just breaching the surface. So if we're breaching the surface and we don't know what this plant can do, why are we legalizing it? We've seen the harms it's done. We need to study the good. It's the individual chemicals in it. It's not the full plant. God has put a lot of things on this earth that I wouldn't consume. Because it'll kill you.
No, this is already question rebuttal, question rebuttal. So we're moving on. This one is for Sheriff Kamel. Could the police arrest more pedophiles and other threats to our children if the police would not spend thousands of hours chasing a green plant used by citizens who are ill?
We do chase our pedophiles. We take every crime very seriously. In Charlotte County, I can tell you we take our drug crimes seriously because our drug crimes we find are related to the majority of our other crimes. When we arrest somebody on a theft, robbery, burglary, anything, why are they doing it? They're doing it to support the drug habit. And most of those people, as we stated earlier, it's a gateway drug. Does that mean everybody's going to get addicted? Does that mean everybody's going to increase to a stronger drug? No. But it is a gateway drug, and that's where they start. They start with marijuana. It was also stated that we make a fortune off forfeitures. I don't make a fortune off marijuana forfeitures. The forfeiture laws are there where we can forfeit your assets if they're used in the commission of a felony. I'm not taking everybody's property when we make little marijuana arrests. So we take all crime seriously.
Anybody want to take this? Side?
Really?
Kind of, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Sheriff. Why do the polls show that support for Amendment 2 is falling? John?
Well, the polls, they have spent $4 or $5 billion in ads telling us that, number one, drug dealers are going to be caregivers. That scares the bejesus out of me. And I know it's not true. They've spent $4 to $5 million telling us that doctors are going to be prescribing this, and that, instead of, it can't be prescribed by doctors. Do you know why that these studies aren't done, Sheriff? It's a Schedule I drug. There can be no studies in America, Sheriff, ever, because it's a Schedule I drug. And you know why it's a Schedule I drug? Because once upon a time there was a movie called Reefer Madness. And Reefer Madness stood for the proposition that a black man might seduce a white woman with marijuana. And by God, we can't have that. And then it became a Schedule I drug. This is the facts, sir. Wikipedia tonight. Wikipedia. So what did they say? And they said, well, listen, let's make it worse. We used to call it cannabis. Let's call it marijuana. It's a Schedule I drug that cannot, Sheriff, ever be studied the way it is in Israel. If you all want to know the real truth, if you care about the truth, go look at Sanjay Gupta's special called Weed. He went to Israel, where for 50 years they had studied this, cured people, helped people for 50 years. It can never happen in America because it's a Schedule I drug, and it's impossible to ever happen in America. And that's just the fact.
It's available by a legal prescription since the 80s. You got Marinol. Marinol is prescribed for those with cancer dealing with the sickness from radiation. You got Kesamet, also for HIV and cancer. They're currently studying Setivex. Setivex is an oral spray for those with MS. They're also were in the late stages of the Charlotte's Web strand to release that. Now that's already been approved in the UK and Canada, and it was expected to be approved here very shortly. We jumped the gun a little bit with the legislation, which if that gets it to the patients a little bit faster, then fine, I'm good with that.
All right, definitely back and forth again, but quick.
Okay.